The moment you hit send and see those two gray check marks sit there without turning blue, or worse, you see the red receipt with no bubble popping up in return, a switch flips in your brain. It's a mix of anxiety, frustration, and a desperate urge to fix the silence. You start scrolling back through your previous messages, overanalyzing every comma and emoji, wondering where things went sideways. You imagine that if you could just find the perfect combination of words, something witty, something bold, or something vulnerable, you could bridge the gap and pull her back into the conversation. This is the trap of the magical text. You believe that one more message will be the key that unlocks her interest again. But in reality, that impulse is driven by the fear of loss, not by genuine connection. Sending that follow up message isn't a strategy, it's a reaction to discomfort. And it's the fastest way to signal that your happiness depends on her validation. The golden rule of doing nothing is powerful because it flies in the face of everything your panicked ego wants to do. When you text a woman and she doesn't respond, the silence creates a vacuum. Most men are terrified of that vacuum and try to fill it with more noise, more questions, and more effort. By doing absolutely nothing, you allow that vacuum to exist. You show her, and more importantly, you show yourself, that your life doesn't stop just because a screen stayed dark. Doing nothing is a loud statement of self-worth. It tells her that you are a man with options, a man with a busy life, and a man who doesn't need to chase anyone to feel secure. It transforms you from someone who is begging for a seat at the table into the person who owns the table. When you choose the path of silence, you are essentially passing a high stakes test of emotional maturity. Think about the mechanics of attraction. It thrives on space, mystery, and the feeling that you are a catch who isn't easily swayed by a bit of coldness. If she's just busy, your silence makes her realize you aren't a high maintenance burden. If she's testing your cool, you just aced it. If she's losing interest, your silence is the only thing that might actually make her wonder why you aren't chasing her, which can reignite that spark of curiosity. By doing nothing, you stop the bleeding of your own attractive energy. You move from a position of weakness, where you are waiting and hoping, to a position of absolute power, where you are simply living your life. The silence isn't a defeat, it's your greatest competitive advantage. When you make the conscious decision to stop reacting and start observing, you are essentially rigging the game of dating in your favor. Most guys view a non-response as a problem that needs to be solved immediately, but the win no matter what philosophy flips that logic on its head. It turns the silence from a source of anxiety into a strategic advantage, where you come out on top regardless of her reasons. By choosing not to send that second or third text, you aren't just waiting. You are actively managing your value. You are creating a situation where every possible outcome leads back to you being the high value prize. This isn't about playing mind games. It's about emotional efficiency. It's about recognizing that your attention is a currency, and you shouldn't be spending it on someone who hasn't acknowledged your last deposit. When you step back, you gain clarity, and you force the universe to reveal exactly where you stand without you having to beg for an answer. In scenario A, let's assume she actually likes you. Life is chaotic. Maybe her boss dropped a project on her desk, she's dealing with a family emergency, or she simply forgot to hit send while juggling a dozen other things. If you jump in with a, "Hey, did you get my text?" or a forced joke to get her attention, you immediately kill the mystery. You become a chore on her to-do list. However, when you do nothing, you become a refreshing rarity. When she finally clears her schedule and sees that you haven't budged, that you didn't panic or get needy, her respect for you skyrockets. She realizes that you are a man who is grounded in his own reality and doesn't need constant reassurance. This lack of reaction is a massive subconscious green flag that screams confidence. It proves that you have a life outside of her, which actually makes her want to be a bigger part of it. Your silence does more to build attraction than 1,000 perfect sentences ever could. In scenario B, we look at the reality where she simply isn't interested or has lost the spark. This is where most men lose their dignity. but where you will find your greatest victory. If she has decided she's not a match, there is no magical string of words that will suddenly make her fall in love with you. In fact, sending more texts only confirms her decision to walk away. It makes her feel justified in ghosting you because she sees you as someone who doesn't get it. By doing nothing, you win by default. You win back your time, your energy, and your self respect. You avoid the embarrassment of chasing someone who doesn't want to be caught. Instead of wasting weeks trying to revive a dead flame, you immediately redirect that power back into your own life. You take that energy and pour it into your fitness, your career, your hobbies, or other women who are excited to hear from you. You win because you refused to play a losing game, and that habit of self prioritization will make you 10 times more attractive to the next woman who enters your life. Choosing to do nothing when you're met with silence is one of the hardest psychological hurdles you'll ever face in the dating world. But that's exactly why it's the ultimate training ground for your character. When you text a woman you really like and the hours turn into days without a reply, a war breaks out inside your mind. Your ego starts screaming at you to do something, anything, to ease the tension of the unknown. It wants you to send that check-in text just so you can stop feeling the discomfort of being ignored. But when you give in to that urge, you aren't just sending a message, you are telling your own subconscious mind that your peace of mind is for sale and that her response is the only thing that can buy it back. Every time you white knuckle through that impulse and decide to stay silent, you are performing a representative in the gym of emotional self mastery. You are proving to yourself that you are the captain of your own ship and that your emotional state isn't a puppet controlled by someone else's thumbs. This process of building internal strength is about shifting your entire foundation from being externally validated to internally driven. Most men fail this test because they view the silence as a void they need to fill, rather than an opportunity to practice discipline. They think that by sending one more text, they are taking action. But true action is the ability to govern your own impulses. When you refuse to react, you are effectively rewiring your brain to stop seeking approval from strangers. You are teaching your subconscious that you are a high-value man who is complete with or without a reply. This isn't just about this one girl. It's about the man you are becoming in the process. You are developing a poker face for life. By sitting with the uncertainty and the discomfort of the silence without breaking, you develop a level of grit and self-assurance that most men simply don't have. This internal shift is visible to everyone you meet. It's a quiet, heavy confidence that doesn't need to shout to be heard. The beauty of this discipline is that it creates a permanent upgrade to your personality that you carry into every future interaction. Every time you resist the urge to double text, you become less needy, less reactive, and more grounded. You start to realize that the world doesn't end just because a conversation stalled, and that realization is incredibly liberating. You stop being a hunter who is desperate for a kill and start becoming the prize that people have to earn access to. This internal strength is what actually makes you high value. It's not about the car you drive or the clothes you wear. It's about the fact that you cannot be easily rattled. When you eventually meet the next woman, you won't be acting confident. You will actually be confident because you've survived the silence before and realized you were just fine without her. You become a man who is governed by his own principles rather than his temporary emotions, and that is the most magnetic quality a man can possess. To truly stop the spiral of self-doubt that happens when she doesn't text back, you need to pull the curtain back and look at the female reality. Most men view dating through their own lens, a lens where they might get a few matches a week, and every message they send feels like a high-stakes investment. But for an attractive woman in the modern world, the landscape is the total opposite. She isn't living in a world of scarcity. She is living in a world of overwhelming, nonstop digital noise. Between dating apps, Instagram DMs, and WhatsApp, she isn't just busy. She is literally being bombarded by hundreds of men who are all saying the exact same thing at the exact same time. When she doesn't reply to you, It's rarely a calculated insult or a sign that you're a failure. Most of the time, your message is simply buried under 50 other hey and what's up texts from guys she hasn't even had time to sort through yet. Think of her phone as a crowded room where everyone is shouting for her attention at once. In that environment, her brain naturally goes into filter mode. She has to tune out the noise just to stay sane. If you understand this, you realize that taking her silence personally is like getting mad at the ocean for being wet. It's just the nature of her environment. When you send a text and she doesn't respond immediately, you have a choice. You can join the chorus of shouting men by sending a second check in text, or you can be the only guy in the room who stays quiet. When you double text or show frustration, you are instantly categorized as just another needy guy who requires a high level of maintenance. You become part of the noise that she wants to tune out. You prove to her that your emotional stability is dependent on her attention, and nothing kills attraction faster than being a burden on her already cluttered schedule. By staying silent and doing nothing, you perform a pattern interrupt that makes you stand out more than any clever pickup line ever could. In a sea of men who are constantly chasing, checking in, and begging for a reply, the man who says nothing becomes a fascinating mystery. She will eventually look at her phone, see your name, and realize that you are the only one who didn't freak out when she went quiet. This creates a powerful shift in the power dynamic. She starts to wonder, why isn't he chasing me? Is he talking to someone else? Is he just that busy and successful? By simply refusing to be affected by her timeline, you signal that you are a man of high status who doesn't have the time or the inclination to beg for a response. You become the rare, cool guy who isn't shaken by the modern dating circus. And in her world of 1,400 unread messages, that makes you the most intriguing person in her inbox. The 7-day rule is your ultimate psychological lifeline when the pressure of the do nothing strategy feels like it's about to break you. We've all been there. Your heart is racing, your thumbs are hovering over the keyboard, and you're convinced that if you don't send one specific, clever message right now, she's going to slip away forever. This is where the 1 week exception comes in to save you from yourself. Instead of fighting your biology and trying to force yourself to be a stone cold monk, you give yourself a release valve. You sit down, open your phone, and write out exactly what you want to say. Get all that anxious energy out of your system and onto the screen. But here is the critical step. Do not hit send. Copy that text, paste it into your notes app, and set a calendar alert for exactly 7 days from this moment. By doing this, you aren't telling your brain no, which only makes the craving stronger. You're telling your brain not yet, which instantly lowers your internal temperature and stops the panic. This strategy works so effectively because it provides a safety valve for your ego. When you're in the middle of a silence-induced spiral, your mind goes into a state of perceived emergency. You feel like the window of opportunity is slamming shut, and that urgency is what causes you to make weak, needy mistakes. By promising yourself that you are allowed to send that text in a week, you trick your brain into relaxing. It satisfies that need to act without actually committing the social suicide of a double text. What you'll find, almost without fail, is that after 3 or 4 days have passed, your perspective will shift completely. The text that felt life or death on Tuesday will usually look desperate and unnecessary by Saturday. Most of the time, you'll look back at that note a week later and be incredibly relieved that you didn't send it, because your self-worth will have returned, and you'll realize you don't actually need her response as much as you thought you did. Furthermore, from a tactical dating perspective, a 1 week gap is the only time frame that keeps your dignity intact if you absolutely must reach out again. Let's look at the 0.1% chance scenario. The rare case where she genuinely missed your message, her phone broke, or she got overwhelmed and simply forgot. If you text her again 4 hours later, or even 2 days later, you look like a man who is staring at his phone, waiting for her life to happen. You look like a man without options. But if you wait a full 7 days, you look like a man who just happened to notice a week later that a conversation never finished. A text sent after a week is perceived as low pressure and relaxed. It signals that you've been busy living a high value life and only just now got around to checking your messages again. It changes the narrative from, "Why aren't you talking to me?" to, "Oh, hey, I totally forgot we were mid chat. How's it going?" It preserves your status while giving the connection one final dignified chance to breathe, ensuring that if it does move forward, it's because you stayed in control. Ultimately, reaching the next level in your dating life isn't about discovering some secret magic pill or a hidden line of code that hacks a woman's brain. It's about a much more powerful and sustainable process: the systematic elimination of the small, desperate mistakes that have been quietly killing your attraction for years. Most men fail because they are constantly leaking meaty energy, the kind of energy that begs for a reply, searches for a reaction, and feels unsettled by silence. When you finally commit to the art of doing nothing, you aren't just being passive, you are actively taking the lead. You are deciding that your value is fixed and that no one else's behavior can move the needle on your self worth. This shift from chasing to leading is the single most attractive transformation a man can undergo. It marks the moment you stop being a consumer of attention and start being a producer of your own internal happiness. Leading with discipline means understanding that needy behavior is the ultimate attraction killer because it signals that you are incomplete. By mastering the silence, you prove that you are a finished product. I won't lie to you. The first time you choose to do nothing while your heart is pounding and you're dying to check your phone, it will be incredibly difficult. It will feel like you're losing. But in reality, that is the exact moment you are winning. This is the forge where your true confidence is built. With every hour that passes where you remain grounded and focused on your own goals instead of her inbox, the urge to react gets weaker. It's like a muscle. The more you train yourself not to care about an unanswered text, the more naturally attractive you become. Eventually, this behavior stops being a strategy and simply becomes who you are. You become the man who is so deeply engaged with his own mission and his own life that a lack of a reply isn't a crisis. It's barely a footnote in your day. The version of you that women find impossible to ignore is the version that genuinely doesn't notice when she goes quiet. This isn't a game of playing hard to get. It's the reality of being hard to get because your time and attention are actually focused on high value pursuits. When you lead with discipline, you project an aura of self sufficiency that is incredibly rare in a world of desperate, thumb twiddling men. You aren't sitting around wondering why she hasn't messaged. You're busy at the gym, closing deals, hanging with your friends, or pursuing your passions. That level of detachment is magnetic because it shows her that if she wants to be part of your world, she has to keep up with you, not the other way around. Be that man. Be the guy who is so solid in his own skin that a digital silence cannot shake him. When you stop chasing the win and start living the win, you'll realize that the success you've been looking for has been waiting for you to simply stop trying so hard.